I got a story to tell. And it's all about Mayor Pete. And he's one of the candidates, the Democratic candidates for presidential elections of 2020. And he would be what one would consider a center-left candidate, or a moderate to some, especially some on the further left. Some even call him a Republican, but I wouldn't even go that far. Now, this story was written by a journalist at the publication by the name of Slate. I think her name's Ashley Feinberg. Now, it's quite an interesting story if you put it in context and if you understand why. Because at face value, it might seem a bit too non-substantive, a bit too nitpicky. But it's a story about Mayor Pete's Wikipedia page and the history behind its creation, its maintenance, and most importantly, the identity of the person who is behind it. Now, when the journalists looked into the Wikipedia page, they found that the person who's behind it seems to elicit the behavior of someone that either knows Pete very well in terms of his history, or it could be Pete himself. That could be a reasonable argument that can be made for that. Now, there's several factors. A lot of them, if you look at them in isolation, then it might look like, oh, it's just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence. But when you put it all together, it starts to paint a very funny picture. Okay, so here's what it is. The account that's behind the current page of Mayor Pete. And that's important because there was another page of Mayor Pete's, or Pete Buttigieg, that was made before, that was swiftly deleted. And I'll tell you the reasons behind that later. But for now, what's important to know is the name of the account. And that's Streeling, which is a weird word, like Streeling. Very weird word. Looking into it, in fact, it's Old English for wandering aimlessly. Sorry, not English, Irish, Old Irish. Now, in a book by James Joyce by the name of Ulysses, the word streel, which is basically, the first part of that word, streeling, is used quite often. And guess who happens to hold that book in high regard as probably their favorite book that they've ever read? None other than Mayor Pete. So that's the first that's the entry point into, okay, who is the Streeling character and what is his connection to Mayor Pete? So then we dig further, and then we start to see a lot of a continuation of coincidences that start to make you feel like, okay, something's up here. So beyond that, Streeling seems to have been publishing or updating pages on Wikipedia that have a lot to do, which are closely connected to Mayor Pete ever since he opened or started the Mayor Pete page. That was in 2011 that he started the Mayor Pete page. Literally hours after Pete was elected as mayor of South Bend, Indiana, which is a small town in the South, I think. And Mayor Pete has had certain associations that this person took it upon themselves to update in connection to Mayor Pete once he was mayor. For example, on notable lists of alumni to places like the Rhodes Scholar List, which Mayor Pete is one of, and then he updates it to say, hey, look, one of our Rhodes Scholars has become the mayor of Indiana, or at least to reference him and call back to the Mayor Pete page. And then you see other more interesting things like people who know Mayor Pete or who he may be aware of, but only if you really knew him. For example, Mayor Pete's dad is a professor that worked in the English department of Notre Dame University. Now, another notable scholar by the name of, I think it's Tom Eagleton or something like that, he attended Notre Dame University as a visiting professor in the English department. His Wikipedia page was updated to take note of that. Isn't that interesting? The same exact place where Mayor Pete's dad worked as an English professor. Now, a visiting professor's page is updated to show that he went there by the same account, by the way. So what we're doing was we're looking at pages on Wikipedia that Streeling has either created or maintained or updated some information. And that's the way that Wikipedia works. Random users can come on there and make changes or even create pages. And it's done in a democratic way, but also with a sense of trust, in the sense of you must not be the person whose page you're creating, and you shouldn't be someone who works for that person. In addition to that, when changes are made or when pages are created in a democratic fashion, the more senior members of Wikipedia will discuss and decide whether information should be kept, removed, or even if a whole page can be removed. So this is the environment that we're working within. And this is the environment that Streeling was working within. In addition to that, he made a bunch of other updates to other people's pages who may have crossed paths with Mayor Pete, or even furthermore, knew him directly. For example, a guy by the name of Andre Cherney. Him and Mayor Pete seems to have followed a very similar career path. Now, Streeling updates or maintains Cherney's account, right? Why? Why is he updating the account of someone who has a similar career path to Mayor Pete? And how similar, you may ask? Well, they both went to Harvard, although they graduated at different times. Cherney graduated in 97. Then he returned in 04, just when Mayor Pete was graduating. Beyond that, they both worked in some capacity for the John Kerry presidential campaign. And John Kerry, you may know, is one of the people who was running for president on the Democratic side back in the day. And they both happened to work for that campaign. Perhaps at different times, who knows if they, would have directly known each other. But then probably the most interesting overlap, you could say, is that both Cherney and Mayor Pete both worked in intelligence as intelligence officers in the U.S. Navy Reserve. Cherney from 03 to 11 and Pete from 09 to 2017. So they would have both been there between 09 and 2011. That we know for a fact. Now, beyond that, the only other sort of connection that we can see in plain view is if you look at Cherney's Twitter account, he's not really involved in politics anymore, but what he is doing is he's basically a huge Pete fan, and he's probably going to vote for Pete if you look at what he says about Pete on his Twitter page. So both following very similar. Oh, the other thing is Cherney ran for state treasurer in Arizona in 2009. And Mayor Pete ran for state treasurer in Indiana in 2010, a year later, right? Which is, I guess these two people, very similar kinds of people, went to the same schools, worked for the same people, and somehow the Streeling account is updating the person in question who could be related to Pete in some way. Interesting, but let's move on because there's even more. A guy by the name of David Wax, who's a musician, a page of a school, a college by the name of Deep Springs College, was updated to show this David Wax as a notable alumni. What's the relevance? Why is that important? Because David Wax knew Pete. He actually played at Pete's wedding as a musician, and he also claims on his website that he's a good friend of Mayor Pete's. So why are you why is Streeling updating pages of people that may have been in Pete's orbit over the years, as well as Pete? Now, the reason why we're asking the question why is because when you look at how he's started Mayor Pete's page, he or she, shall I say, the Streeling character, you'll see that they do their utmost to try and distance themselves from being seen as either Mayor Pete himself or anyone associated closely with Mayor Pete in terms of the campaigns he's on or his camp. He basically goes out of his way to say, hey, look, I am in no way associated with the campaign. I'm just someone that basically, knows about it and wants to, update and show a notable person. Now, it gets even more interesting when you look at the person who first tried to set up a Pete Buttigieg page. It was when he was running for state treasurer in 2010, a year before he was elected as mayor, or a year before he ran for mayor and was elected, he ran for state treasurer. Even though that was an unsuccessful campaign, somebody created a page and also created a callback in terms of the statewide elections to say, hey, there's a guy called Mayor Pete, among others, who's now running for state treasurer. And then he created his page. Now what happens is the page is deleted by other Wikipedia users who deem that he's not notable enough. One of the reasons why they say he's not notable is because of a photo that was uploaded, or not that he wasn't notable, but one of the reasons they put forward to say that the page was not legitimate was to say that, look, there's a photo that was uploaded on this page that was created by another user by a different name in a year before Streeling set up the Mayor Pete Buttigieg page. And that photo was given to that user by the Mayor Pete camp, or the Pete Buttigieg camp, during the state treasurer race. What's the name of that account that set up that first page that was deleted? The name is Hanumang06, which I have no idea what it could or would mean, but the writer tries to track down who this Hanuman character is, and they do. This Hanuman character is a guy by the name of Nihar Garg. Funny name, but it is what it is. So he tracks him down, tries to ask him a couple of questions. They go back and forth via email, and Nihar Garg doesn't really want to answer too many questions, especially about updates that he made to the account or trying to create that first account. What he does say is he is Streeling as well. So he says he's Streeling, and he says, yes, he did set up that first page that was deleted. So what he's actually saying is, I set up the first page. I uploaded a photo that was directed by the Mayor Pete campaign. Because of that direction and close association, and by the way, Mayor Pete's state treasurer campaign admitted that Nihar Garg had worked for them as a volunteer. So there's a definite direct connection there. He worked for them as a volunteer, and then he tries to set up a page under the account name Hanumang, which is then deleted because, hey, they feel like, okay, there's too much of a close association. It seems like you're getting direction from the Pete camp. What happens is this Nihar guy sets up another account. He calls himself Streeling. According to him, he set up the Streeling account, which then creates another Pete Buttigieg page hours after he's elected as mayor, a year down the line, right? So that's what we know. And that's what all the camps are pretty much admitting to. Now, what the Pete camp is not admitting to, and what Nihar Garg of Hanumang and apparently, allegedly, Streeling are not admitting to, is whether this close association continued under Streeling and under the current Mayor Pete page as we know it today. They're all saying that there's no association, that Nihar Garg only worked for the campaign as a volunteer, the state treasurer campaign, and had no association with them thereafter. Okay? So let's get to the crux of the issue now, because this is where we try to see whether people are telling lies or not about the association of the person who's handling the current page of Mayor Pete, who created it, who's been updating it over the years since 2011. This final piece gives us a clue, a very evidential clue. And it's this. Another photo was uploaded to the current Mayor Pete page soon after he became mayor. That was by Streeling, who now allegedly were being told by the guy from a previous account that created a Mayor Pete page that was deleted. He's saying he's the same guy. He just set up a new account and created a new page, but now with no association with the campaign or the camp. He uploads a photo. The photo is then deleted. The deleted photo is recovered by the writer of this article through mirror sites that basically download web pages when they're created or at some point and hold on to that information, right? And this was actually quite a close call because apparently you're not always able to recover things that are deleted, but this was. It is recovered in its pristine form in terms of the metadata, in terms of the size. And when we looked at the metadata, we saw the name of the photographer who took the photo of Mayor Pete when he became mayor. Now, when this photo was uploaded, because we see the date on Wikipedia, it was uploaded at a time when only the photographer or Mayor Pete's campaign would have had access to that photo. There's no other way. It wasn't on the website that shows who the new mayor is, because that hadn't been updated at the time. So then the question is, how was that photo acquired? And that's when things get really mystical, shall we say. Because Streeling says, when he uploads the photo, he says, no, I got this through no direction from the campaign, through no association with the campaign or the Pete camp. Pete's camp says they had no association with anyone who created the page of Mayor Pete when he became mayor. They don't even know who Streeling is. Even if Nihar Garg says that he is Streeling, they wouldn't know or have any association with that. That's where things get misty. That's where things get really dodgy, shall we say. And that's where we come to the question of whether Mayor Pete is either responsible directly or indirectly or in association or in cahoots with whoever is maintaining, who's creating and maintaining his image online. And why there would be any reason, because it's not illegal, to hide that fact from us or from the writer who was asking those questions. And also, why was Nihar Garg not very open to discussing anything beyond just saying, hey, yes, I'm Streeling. Yes, I was Hainumang 06 who set up the first page that was deleted. But I'm not going to discuss the things that I uploaded, why I uploaded them, how I got them. It's just too dodgy. So this brings me to my take on the situation. And here's my take. I think whoever created the Mayor Pete page, the first one that was deleted and the one that we see now, whoever created it is someone who's very close to Mayor Pete. Maybe not him, but someone who's very close to him. And he's hiding that fact. And his camp, whether they know it or not, may be hiding that fact or may just not be aware of it. But I think Pete must know. If you look at the kinds of things that were updated, which you would have really had to know Pete very well to know about those things, to even be interested in updating those pages. Literary scholars who are just visiting the same department that your father works at. I mean, isn't that strange? Making those kinds of updates. But hey, I leave it up to you to decide. But that's the fact, and I've given you the context and the reason why I think it's important to look at this kind of story. Because my question is, what is the character of Mayor Pete? Is he in it for himself? Or is he a man of the people? You know, I know that's more of a cliche, but the point is, we are trying to get to the bottom of what kind of person this is that wants to perhaps manufacture an image of a future president and manufacture his way to the top and probably cares more about his image than he would about the actual issues and the actual people that are affected by the things that he would want to do in power. How genuine is he? How authentic is he? How organic is he? Questions are raised here, and as non-substantive as it may seem, I think this story speaks to that. And I do applaud the writer who actually went to great lengths to look into this. And I think that more stories like this should be done, not just about Pete, but even other candidates, in looking into, okay, what is this about? Is this about power and prestige? Or is this about actually helping improve people's lives? And that's my take.